Well, people, things aren't looking great. The Senate voted down stimulus bill, which is essentially a corporate bailout tonight, and it's virtually certain that the stock market will crash even further tomorrow. How badly will it crash? I don't know. I'm not a market guy, but it appears like it will be quite bad. Now, initially, Mitch McConnell had scheduled a revote on this bill for shortly after the markets opened, presumably as a tactic to spook the Democrats into looking at like the first 15 minutes of market activity and saying to themselves, "Oh my goodness, we need to sort of jettison our reservations about this bill and vote for it." But I guess it looks like McConnell has now scrapped that tactic, and they're not going to vote until afternoon. At which point, the spiral in the markets might be, I don't know, irreversible, or don't take my word for it because I don't know with any degree of certainty, nor does pretty much anybody. I don't think. Um, so the question is now, excuse me. The question is now, are we screwed? And I think that the markets were going to be crashing regardless. I mean, they could have maybe some daily ups and downs, but the trajectory is pretty clear on a downward spiral. Because, I mean, the entire country is essentially going to be locked down for the foreseeable future. People are saying it's going to be a 2 week period. I mean, how could that be possible? I guess it is technically possible. Who knows? We're in unprecedented territory. But apparently, the peaks in coronavirus cases, like in New York, for example, are not going to hit till May. So, how could you justify having us on lockdown now, but then removing the lockdown in 2 weeks when we're still going to be a month or more away from the peak of the virus spreading? So, everybody's going to flood back out into the streets in 2 weeks and contract the virus and ensure that it's contracted by an exponentially greater number of people. I mean, there are still people out and about right now because they don't still get the message as to what is really going on. I mean, look at the numbers in Spain right now; they're skyrocketing. France, Italy, still, um, and all the data seems to. See, I shouldn't stream this late because obviously I'm slightly more tired. But all the data seems to indicate we're just 2 weeks behind, like Spain, for instance. And the death rates in New York City, in particular, have already gotten really disturbing. And I don't think we're anywhere near the peak there. So how are people saying that we're going to plan to do this for just 2 weeks? Like, it's hard to imagine how a lockdown would be justified now, but not in 2 weeks or a month. But in terms of this bailout package, I mean, look at what they're doing. Everybody, I would think, who is of sound mind and has rational faculties would agree that at least a chief priority at the moment should be to simply get cash infusions to people who can't work in restaurants anymore, who have lost their jobs, who uh, can't go find work, can't do anything. Shouldn't we just be sending them money? I mean, that's pretty much become almost conventional wisdom. You have Mitt Romney supporting it. Tulsi had a bill. Andrew Yang is like living his best life because everybody's suddenly adopted the thing that he was campaigning on. And so you would think that would be the priority, and yet, what do we have? Essentially, what Mitch McConnell came up with is a slush fund where Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, has unilateral discretion to essentially bail out whatever corporation he wants with really vague criteria as to what he's permitted to do. So that means whatever corporation has the most savvy lobbyists are going to be able to get the bailout money. And, this has happened before in living memory. I wasn't a journalist, I was in the media at the time, but I can vividly recall the 2008 crash and the bailout that was rushed through, in part because the specter of the crashing stock market was used to sort of get everybody in line quickly. And by the way, Joe Biden voted for TARP and still defends it to this day. He defended it in the so called debate with Bernie a week ago. And, everybody thought that the TARP was super necessary in that emergency context, but then, as the months and years went on, we looked back on the malfeasance of TARP with chagrin, or at least that was the fairly widely accepted view of the utility of TARP. And this, I don't even is maybe even less warranted. I mean, I guess it's debatable because the banks collapsed in 2008 partly because of their own malign business practices having to do with mortgage-backed securities and that whole ordeal. Whereas now you could argue that, like the cruise ship industry isn't itself to blame for a global pandemic. I mean, I get that. But should we really be prioritizing bailing out the cruise ship industry? Is that a vital service? Is that a vital sector of the economy? Doubtful. Boeing has been working overtime to get a bailout. If you followed the saga of Boeing over the past couple of years, gross mismanagement, and why should the taxpayers be footing the bill for Boeing right now in the context of a pandemic? Like, what relationship does the pandemic have to Boeing? Or is it just an excuse for Boeing to get all their mistakes absolved and to extract public funds for their own self-preservation? Like, why do I, a taxpayer, I'm not me specifically, I'm sort of a figure of speech, why do I or you as a taxpayer suddenly have an obligation to bail out a weapons contractor or weapons manufacturer, Boeing? I mean, that's one of the sectors of its business. Why is that suddenly our responsibility now in light of the pandemic? A little odd. But of course, never let a crisis go to waste. Remember that mantra from Rahm Emanuel? Well, Mitch McConnell's not going to let a crisis go to waste. He's going to use it as an opportunity to give his favorite corporations what they desire. And I'm sure Democrats will participate in that to some extent, but they have sort of united as a caucus, at least tonight, and not voted in favor of the procedural motion that would have allowed this to go forward. But I would guess that they're going to come up with some kind of compromise. Although who knows? I mean, the Congress is sort of paralyzed at the time being, and Trump, given his just mania and wild tweeting, which has continued just before I started the stream with an all caps screed, um, not the most adept broker between warring congressional factions. Let's put it that way. Otherwise, his first term in office might have gone a little differently, and he could have got a few things done legislatively beyond an enormous tax cut in 2017 for corporations. I know others got cuts as well, but the 2017 tax cut bill was heavily geared at cutting taxes for giant corporations. And what did those corporations like Boeing do? Well, they didn't stock up their cash reserves in the event of some kind of emergency situation like that. No, they did stock buybacks. And now they're running back to the taxpayer when times get rough and asking for more of a bailout. I mean, so everybody needs to calm down, analyze the situation as objectively and rationally as possible. The stock market's going to crash anyway, so if you take another day or two or three or even more to figure out the best course of action here, it's not going to have, I don't think, that much of an impact in the long run compared to if you rush through some corrupt slush fund right now that we're going to be saddled with for years to come potentially. Um, and by the way, where was Bernie tonight? He was not in the Senate to vote on this, the most consequential bailout of legislation since 2008. Rather, he was in Burlington doing a live stream with AOC. Okay, I mean, good for you. If you want to have a live stream with AOC, I guess that's fine. Certain people enjoy that at this point. But I don't know. It seems a tad more important to me to fulfill your senatorial duties on a night like tonight. There actually were six total senators who weren't voting, but the other five are in quarantine for exposure to coronavirus. Among them, Rand Paul, who apparently could have exposed others, including Mitt Romney. I mean, this is just crazy. And so they couldn't vote. And also, we found out today that Harvey Weinstein is exposed. I made a joke on Twitter that I had Rand Paul and Harvey Weinstein on my coronavirus bingo card. So I won the jackpot for tonight, March 22nd, 2020. Of course, there's no such bingo, there's no such jackpot, but I thought it was a funny joke. So, are we screwed? Well, I mean, there's a prognosis that I saw here from the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, who says that the U.S. unemployment rate may hit 30% in the second quarter of the year because of the various shutdowns. And then there'll be a 50% drop in gross domestic product. Now, if the 30% estimate is anywhere near accurate, that's worse than the Great Depression. I don't mean to be scaremongering at all, but I'm trying to dispassionately relate to you that if this figure cited by the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis is accurate, then we're headed for economic circumstances that are even more dire than the Great Depression, which is why I find it so absurd that you have people who are running around confidently proclaiming what they think their election results are going to be. Like, Joe Biden can't win. I don't know if he can or can't. I actually think he has a decent chance to win because the economy is crashing, if you haven't noticed. But either way, how could you possibly friggin' know right now, you genius? Look at the situation we're in. This is insane. It's unprecedented. So you have no way of forecasting anything right now. You know, if anything, the tumult probably disadvantages the incumbent, although it's hard to say. So have a little bit of humility and don't, you know, shout from the mountaintops that you somehow have an oracle to the future and you know what's going to happen in November. So this little like mini controversy about Joe Biden, you know, being hidden away. Like, where's Joe? That was the hashtag. Where's Joe? He's hiding. It's just like, it's gonna seem so trivial. You know why he was hiding, which makes sense? He's locked up in his house in Wilmington, Delaware, just like everybody. They tried to do a live stream with him on Facebook a couple days ago, and they had a technical problem, and it was embarrassing, and he was mercilessly mocked. So he said, "You know what? I'm going to get like a professional setup constructed in my house. It's going to take a couple days, and then I'm going to have regular updates." And sure enough, they're going to start having the updates tomorrow. So this whole "Where's Joe" thing is so ridiculous. You don't have to invent fake criticisms of Biden or overhyped or exaggerated criticisms of Biden. There's plenty of legitimate criticisms, and yet it annoys me when people resort to these nonsensical criticisms. Now, that doesn't mean I'm a Biden lover, okay? Just like I have disputed many of the prevailing criticisms of Trump over the years, Russiagate, impeachment, concentration camps, Nazis, etc., I'm able to dispute what I regard to be ridiculous criticism of Biden as well, but that doesn't mean that I'm somehow overall this Biden defender. My perspective on Biden has been thematically consistent for a year. So people are going to accuse me and have that, oh, just because Tulsi endorsed Biden, that means I'm now like pro Biden or something. No, I mean, I've always said I wouldn't rule out voting for him if he's the nominee against Trump because I don't know what the circumstances are going to be. I'm inclined not to vote for him. That's my inclination now, but I'm not going to state with absolute certainty that that's how I'm going to feel in October. Um, Either way, it's always annoyed me from the outset that you have almost nobody of any prominence in online media who's like a prominent, who's like a stalwart Biden supporter, right? So if you spend a lot of time on immersed in social media discourse around U.S. politics, there's not going to be anybody who's really vocally pro-Biden. Maybe there's going to be a little bit more now that he's effectively the nominee, but for a long time there really wasn't, and so that created some like analytical and reportorial blind spots around Biden, and I've pointed that out, and I'm continuing to point that out because I find it to be a pervasive problem. And so, if I circumstantially defend Biden on something, or if I point out the idiocy of a particular line of attack that's being used against Biden, doesn't mean I'm a Biden supporter. Just like this rejecting Russiagate didn't make me a Trump supporter. Okay, so try to figure out how you can navigate that logic in your mind as we proceed here. All right, people, I'm really tired and I should have done this sooner in the night, but there's just so much craziness going on that I was following the Senate votes and so forth, so I'm not going to do as long of a stream as I typically might. And if I missed your super chats, I'm sorry, but I'm literally about to pass out from fatigue. So I don't know why I did this tonight. All right, goodbye.